Sheffield United are set to sack their manager as they sit at the Heckingbottom of the Premier League table. Today, we discuss, is it the right decision? And more importantly, who would be the next Premier League manager to be sacked? Roll the intro.
Here we go.
Hello and welcome to the Lost in Possession podcast. If you are joining us for the first time, please do us a very quick favor. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button for free football content every single week. As we said in the intro, there are reports coming out today. Some places saying it's already been done, some places saying it's to be done. But Paul Heckingbottom will be sacked as the Sheffield United manager as they sit at the bottom of the Premier League table. Before we get into other managers and other clubs, let's keep it short and sweet. Is sacking Paul Heckingbottom the right decision? Reese, will come to you first.
Yes, even though it's not all his fault, it had to be done. He's not a Premier League manager, but I mean, come on, they've had one win so far, conceded 39 goals in 14 games. Goal difference is minus 28. Like, they're not getting, they're not going to get. You say you can't get any worse, but they can't get any better as it stands. So they have to do something now.
Yeah, Jamie, agree or disagree?
Yeah, I think he's actually done a good job overall, considering he wasn't expected to get promoted. But when you're losing 5-0 to your relegation rivals, it's a sackable offence on its own. So the fact that they're bottom of the league with a team that's got a 10-point deduction above them, he's sadly got to go. Things have got to change at Sheffield United.
Yeah, I think after the 8-0, there was certain red flags and question marks, but the 5-0 to Burnley and more in perspective that how bad Burnley have been. Everyone's sitting there in disbelief at how badly they've done to get absolutely dominated. And I appreciate there's a red card involved, but 5-0 against Burnley, who are really struggling, it's just not acceptable. Bottom of the table, they don't really look like they've got a hope of winning a game at the minute. So I think we're all, unanimous in our agreement that it is the right decision. I guess the question turns quickly to replacements. Wilder is the current favourite. Again, this is all hypothetical because officially, according to the club, he's not been sacked, but it appears he has. Is there any other people that come to mind? What about Big Sam? Get him in to the end of the season?
In all honesty, they probably can't afford him. Like, Chris Wilder's probably the easy option at this moment in time. He's obviously been at the club before, done a good job, probably will get something out of the players. I don't think Allardyce be something they can afford. I mean, the club itself, are trying to sell. They sold their two best players, one of them to Burnley. So as far as I'm concerned, he's probably out of the question. It's probably what they could do with what they've got at this moment in time.
And with
I think it's going to be internally if it's not Wilder, really. I don't think they haven't got the funds to, like, say what Reece said. Allardyce will be too expensive. It's going to be the same for a lot of the managers out there. So really, it's internally, or it's going to be Chris Wilder.
is that just accepting defeat though? If you assuming they don't go for someone else and they just do it, a caretaker manager, surely that is essentially just resigning yourself to being relegated.
Well, not necessarily. I think he's going to get an 18-month deal. I think he's got results with them before. I would argue that he lost his job with them in 2021, mostly due to, again, poor recruitment from the owners. I think they went about it the wrong way. I know he hasn't quite lived up to expectations since, but it's his club and he probably will get the best out of some of those players. They've got players that fit his style at the very least.
He can also come in and be just sort of. He doesn't need to embed himself within the club. He knows the club. So it's someone who can come in straight away and start possibly getting results. And that's what they need. Because at the moment, it could be likely, like they could be looking at the helm of Derby's record, really. So getting points on the board, I think if you bring in a manager who might try and play a different way, that's going to cause timing sort of difference of when it actually would work. So I don't think it's a bad choice, but you've got to remember it's very unlikely that they're going to survive anyway on whoever they pick. So picking someone who knows the club, I think, is probably the most sensible move
Yeah,
overall.
agreed. And I guess the question is, would he want to go back? I can't remember, Reese. I know you just touched on it. I can't remember the circumstances of him leaving before. Was it bad form and then he was sacked? I can't recall that.
Yeah, yeah, mostly bad form. I can't remember the results exactly, but they were bottom of the league then. If you remember correctly, that ultimately went down. So yeah, it wasn't a good look for them. But I think it just seems to be that the club from the top seems to be the problem.
Yeah. Well, we said to be honest, we said in the summer predicting the games, we said there was a bit of turmoil at the club. We did say, to be fair to all three of us, Heckingbottom doesn't strike us as the guy who's going to survive, make them survive in the Premier League. So I think no one's really that surprised, if I'm being honest. I don't think. I don't think Sheffield United fans will be particularly shocked they're bottom of the table. Obviously, Sheffield fans, if you disagree, please hit us up in the comments. But it feels a little bit inevitable. But we'll see, obviously, in the coming days and weeks. One, if he does actually get sacked and it's confirmed by the club, and two, will it be Wilder? Will it be another classic Premier League survival coach? Let's move on. So, again, this is a good discussion because earlier someone in our Instagram comment, shout out to Owen, said that look, he doesn't actually believe that any other Premier League managers are really under pressure right now. So I guess let's make the point for different teams and different managers. Who should we start with the most likely? Who would you guys say if you had to pick maybe two, maybe three names? Who's under pressure or the most likely to get sacked next, would you say?
I'd probably better say it's probably Company.
Mm.
He's just had a 5-0 win. I think if he lost, he would be the one getting sacked, really. So I think he's under the biggest pressure. Second bottom from the league. There was actually quite high expectations of Burnley. I know I had them to survive relegation. I had them just outside the relegation, but I still had them to survive because they look so good in the Championship. But it looks like they've really found the level of being like what Norwich used to do, of too good for the Championship, not good enough for the Premier League. And that's kind of where they're sitting at the moment. And if this 5-0 doesn't progress Burnley to sort of go on, it probably will be Company next, especially they're sitting second bottom of the league.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think Company. I don't know the bookies odds at the moment, but I assume Company would be, then the next favourite. I think it's why do we think it's going wrong at Burnley? Because again, similar to your point, I think I had them pretty high up on my table prediction, high up in the bottom half, but still fairly high up because I thought it'd be a bit like the Fulham logic where they just absolutely batter everyone in the Championship, so much so that they'd be a decent Prem side. But so far, there's not been much really. I mean,
There's
other
a massive difference between that Fulham side of last year, or was it last year or was it year before? One of them was Mitrovic. Someone who can score 15 to 20 goals in the Premier League will put you mid-table. You've seen it's been the same for, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but Brentford as well. They've had Tony, and that's what's pushed them higher up the league. Like Brentford haven't got the facilities, the money to really be pushing as high as they are, but they've just had that correct goal scorer who's been putting them away, and that's what Burnley just don't have. And I think that's the main issue, really. But then when they're trying to play expansive football against the top sides as well, he's not adapting. Like he got 3-0 against us on the first day of the season. You've seen Spurs smash quite a lot past them. There's been others as well. So he needs to adapt really to certain games, I think, and he's just not doing it. and then no massive goal scorer. I think that's Burnley's biggest problem.
Yeah, you look at their squad and it doesn't look Premier League, if I'm being honest. I think for me their shining light has been Koleosho. Honestly, I genuinely believe, you can mark my words here, in the next probably 3-4 years, I think he will be picked up by a big club. I don't know who it will be and how big the club, but he looks a phenomenal player. But other than that, I've not been impressed by anyone, to be completely honest. Reese, anything to add on Burnley in particular?
Just I think people forget that company hardly pulled up trees at Anderlecht. I think if anything, Burnley were probably lucky to have him. I mentioned before that when they did play Premier League teams last season, they did get heavily beaten, which I thought was going to be the case again when they played the big boys with that style of play. They had a lot of players on loan. I think we seem to forget that. And he's replaced them with a lot of non-Premier League experience. I mean, he's dropped his goalkeeper for Trafford, who was number one at a League One club last season. So I think there's been issues like that, and the failure to adapt tactically. Obviously, it worked against Sheffield United, but he's got to do it against Wolves in the week. That's a sign of, okay, is he going in the right direction or not? I think it's just been one of those. It's just not been experienced, perhaps gone up too quickly after the Premier League, sort of drop, and it's just not necessarily, clicked yet. But the game against Wolves should be a real test as to be whether it has or not.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to a different club. Who would we say is in that next kind of bracket? Obviously, not favourite to be sacked next. Who else are we looking at here?
This is a tough one to actually call, because I think if you think this time last year, 5 managers had already been sacked. We'd already lost Hassan Hootel, I believe. We'd already lost Bruno Lage by then. Thomas Tuchel, Scott Parker, and Steven Gerrard had all been sacked by then. And none of the managers, other than probably, of course, Heckingbottom and now company, I don't see them under huge pressure. I see, for example, Moyes seeing out the season. I see someone like Marco Silva talking himself out of a job, saying something silly and self-destructive. But it's really hard to call.
I'd agree on the Marco Silva one there, Reese, because I do feel like the owner has a screw loose. The biggest point that makes me think that is he's charging 3,000 for a season ticket at Fulham. I think he could just go, you know what, we're not winning enough games, we're not looking as good as last season, I'm going to sack him, and then bring in someone who's probably not as good as Marco Silva. I think he's a really good manager, but I just think the manager, the owner, is someone who could just go, you know what, I'm just going to sack him. It's not enough. It's not good enough for me. Whether it could be even more, it could be worse for Fulham, really, if that's the case.
Yeah, I think to that point as well, he's the kind of character who's going to come out and possibly dig out the owners. Possibly, you can see he's that kind of personality. So I do think that's an interesting one. Looking at the table there, I mean, they're 14th at the minute. Not terrible, but they're a side that, I mean, look, there's not many points in it, let's be fair, but they're not where they want to be. I think they'll believe they can be a top half side, and they've shown they can deliver. So they seem to be losing a little bit of momentum at the minute. What about Luton? What about Rob Edwards? They're not bottom. What's that?
He'll be fine. He'll be fine. He worked a miracle to get him up, and he's actually a very talented coach. I think Luton are in dreamland at the moment, so I think he'll stay. Even they'll go, if they're going to go down, they'll go down fighting, I suppose. So I don't think they need to panic.
Look, everyone thought Luton will be probably rock bottom of this league, so the fact that he's currently fourth from bottom, I know Everton have had the points deduction, so let's say third from bottom. They're still in with a fighting chance. So I think at the moment I don't think there's anyone who's going to do a lot better than what Rob Edwards is doing at the moment.
Yeah. And they're in a
I,
position to keep him if they go like when Deitch was first at Burnley, when they first went down, they kept him and they went up as champions next season and then went on to be a solid team. That's probably what they might do if they go down. That's probably what they need to do.
yeah, like Luton haven't been in the Premier League. Is it ever, or is it something? It's something a long time from being in the top flight.
Yeah, not the Premier League, but first division, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So they haven't been in the Premier League ever. So the fact is, they're currently sitting outside the relegation places. You don't sack him at all.
Yeah.
Like it would be ridiculous. I think it would be utterly ridiculous. It'd probably be like a bit of a Birmingham situation, selling him when your manager's doing well, and then it would come and bite you in the arse like has been for Birmingham.
Yeah. I mean, let's give them a shout out for a minute. I mean, Reese, we'll let you talk about Birmingham. Imagine sacking your manager as a PR stunt for it to then backfire.
There's still time. He's got time to turn it around, but it's not a good move. The fans are already on his back, so they need to turn that around there.
All right. So Rob Edwards, we think is probably safe. Let's talk about Steve Cooper. Again, we got to remember last season, a lot of talk about him being sacked at Forest. Then they stuck with him. It paid off, but they're in 15th. I mean, based on points, I mean, 6 points clear of the relegation zone. So we could probably say they're not even under threat right now, but we know how quickly it can change in the Premier League. Is Cooper one who could get thrown into this mix here and actually end up sacked?
Yeah, he's lost his last three.
With,
He's had the dreaded vote of confidence.
Joint worst form of the league with Sheffield. With Burnley. So yeah, form's awful, isn't it?
They put in a pretty poor performance at the weekend as well. They got to sort themselves out. I think they will. And I don't see who can come in and do much better. But they've got to sort themselves out pretty quick.
Yeah, I think it's for me. I feel like with them, if they've stuck with him once and it's worked, they're probably gonna stick with him through it again. So with Cooper personally, I don't see him being under any real threat unless it gets crazy bad. But I don't see it.
Yeah, if they drop down the table a bit more, then the pressure I think will actually mount up. But it doesn't mean they will get rid of him. And also then it's who do you bring in? So I do feel like that's the sort of issue not an issue they've got because it's fairly comfortable really in the league. But if things were getting worse, you just don't know who they would actually target to bring in. So I think his job is safe, probably to the end of the year, unless things go absolutely horrifically wrong.
I think this is a big thing with the league now is who do you bring in that will take a better job? You know, football's changed so much. We're moving away from the Sam Allardyces, the Steve Bruces, the Mark Hugheses, because they just don't cut it in modern football anymore. So who do you bring in? Clubs are horrendously lazy. They go for managers that are out of work. Well, a manager is out of work for a reason, 9 out of 10 times. So be ambitious and go for a manager already in a job, right? You know, look at some of the work that some managers are doing in the division below. You might actually get yourself a good gem there. John Eustace, I know he's out of work, would all say that's very unfair. He's a perfect example for that, you know. But who, if they're going to look and go for the cheap option, who realistically is out there that would fit the mold?
Yeah.
But I was just thinking, like you said, like Sam Allardyce is why I don't see why a team near the bottom, or sorry, in the bottom three, wouldn't go for him because the whole point is you just got to try and stay up. Like it could be more of a short term solution, but I understand that football's changed, but you can't compete by going like we were saying with Burnley. They're trying to do the same sort of method as what City would do, and it doesn't work. Like it's not working for them. So maybe a Sam Allardyce actually could do a bit better for them in terms of picking up points. It may not be attractive to the fans, which is another problem that owners have these days, but it can keep them in the league, and that's the main target for these clubs. over, I think, over entertainment.
I suppose the argument for against Allardyce at the moment is he's now got 2 relegations on his CV. And I think if you look at when he took over at West Brom, for example, a lot of those players were designed for the modern type of game. I think he's a decent manager, but I don't look at that Forest team and see them adapting to his style quite well. I think they're a little bit more pass the ball, keep the ball on the ground. I'm not saying he's Allardyce's who football, but a one you would probably thrive under that. You know,
does he care enough as well? Like with Big Sam, never being relegated is a flashy title that you want to sort of die to protect. But when that's gone, other than money, other than a payday, what I don't see him having that motivation or that same level of motivation.
Well, this is it. And the club as well, he might negotiate quite a hard deal. Like if he says, I want an 18-month deal, they probably only want him to the end of the season.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? If he keeps you up, they're stuck, aren't they? And you have to buy his players and you have to, and you could be back to square one before you've even, had the chance to actually get rid of him. And I think that's a problem clubs don't want to fall into.
I don't see his motivation being any less than before, really. I think if he's going to go in, I think he's someone who's going to be picky about his job as well, though. He's like, I'm fine not being in a job. I want the job that's right for me. So I think he will still have the motivation if he took on a job, because he'd do it on his own terms as well. But that doesn't mean it's. I think he would actually drive quite a hard bargain with the clubs, because I don't blame him. Why would he take 6 months? You want a bit more job security than just to the end of the season, and then maybe they'll keep you or maybe they won't. So I think he's entitled to try and go for an 18-month contract at least.
Yeah, they're entitled. Like I have no qualms with it. That's what we would do, right? You want to secure your own future. I just think the way the game has changed. I mean, you look at even Bournemouth; they're going for like these appointments of like Irola now. They're not. You think they'd be the prime club for someone like Sam Allardyce? You look 20 years ago. If Bournemouth were at the Premier League in where they are now, they'd be going for the Sam Allardyces. They'd be going for the Steve Bruces. They'd be going for the probably even get a Martin O'Neill in there, or do you know what I mean? Mark Hughes, those names that had a big name all them years ago, probably learned under a good manager. Now they're going for these left field appointments. These, like I said, eye rollers. Never in a million years would you think Bournemouth would be able to attract a manager with that style, and that's the way clubs are going now.
Is he one that we could say now as who could be in this next to possibly be sacked kind of scenario? Because they sacked Cooper. Was it not Cooper? Who's the one?
O'Neill.
O'Neill, that's the one. They sacked him when he's done a good job. So it's not like they're so against it. And you've got to remember, Bournemouth have conceded the 3rd most goals in the league this season. So it's not like he's working absolute wonders there. I think he's doing all right points-wise. But I don't see what he would have done, what he's done better than O'Neill, really. I think O'Neill's actually doing quite a good job at Wolves as well. So he's showing that he could have continued doing it at Bournemouth. So I think he could be someone that he's not under pressure due to being relegated, but it's not what the owner wants. I'm just trying to think of other names really to put in this mix.
Yeah, I think he would have been, but he has turned it around, Iriola. Their form's decent, 3 wins, a draw in the last 5. I don't see him on this list personally. I think they've got rid of O'Neill. It showed ambition to get him in, get that style of coaching. So they've got to stick with it. And so far, I know what you're saying. They've not been, they're not blown anyone away. But they have shown progress in my opinion, and their form is better. Let's move on now to the more interesting debates about the top of the table. Naturally, you'd assume managers at the top of the table are not under threat, but I think there is a big one, and we've all discussed it, that could be under pressure despite a reasonable league position. So I guess the elephant in the room is Erik ten Hag. Now, United fans might go, "What are you on about? We're 7th in the table. Why would he be sacked?" But you've got to put this in context. It is Man United, so 7th isn't acceptable. Bottom of their Champions League group. I think that's the big issue here. Bottom of their Champions League group, on the cusp of going out, which is just simply unacceptable, and they've not been playing great. Is Erik ten Hag potentially going to be the next manager sacked? Jamie, what do you think?
Yes, because it's hot. It's easier to get rid of the manager than the players, and I think a lot of the players are deadwood. Really, then you've got players who are completely out of form. Rashford being one of the sort of main ones that are being spoken about. He's falling out with players left, right, and centre, so it could be quite possible you'll see he's completely lost the dressing room because Martial's having arguments with him. I've seen reports on you had the Sancho situation, Varane's sitting on the bench when they've not got two fit centre backs. We've only got two fit centre backs, and he's still not being starting. So something going on there. So he could be just losing the dressing room, and Glazers, with Ratcliffe, could be getting rid of him because you can't just get rid of 22 players in the squad. So he's definitely one with it. One thing I do find interesting though about United is if you look at the teams they've beat and teams they've lost against, really they're beating the teams they should. Forget the Champions League for a second. They're beating the teams they should. They're beaten beaten Brentford at home, Sheffield United away. They've beaten Burnley away. Losing to the likes of Arsenal, Spurs, City. It's like you're losing to the teams that are actually better than you, and you're beating the teams that are worse than you. So in terms of that, it's not actually dreadful in a way. Like he's not overperforming, he's not underperforming. He's literally in the middle. So that's where I feel like it is quite harsh the criticism he gets. But when you're at what my opinion of the biggest club in the world, maybe Real Madrid have something to say about that, but you've got to be overperforming really, or well, it's not overperforming. They just should be expected to get into the top four at least, and he's around there. But
Yeah, I think his job is probably safe for a little while longer. I think they do believe in the project idea. If you want to coach, let someone coach. You can't just keep cutting people, sacking people for no reason. Look, they'll be disappointed. Eight wins, 6 defeats, no draws. You've got to turn some of them defeats into draws. You can't do that over the long term. That's not sustainable with that sort of record. They've shown signs of turning corner. They put in a brilliant performance away to Everton, and then they put in that dross performance against Newcastle at the weekend. I mean, was it 8 shots to 22? I mean, come on, like that's poor. That is poor. You think they could have gone there and nicked a 1-0 win if they wanted to. They've got to sort that out. And like your point, Jamie, you said about, looks like he's lost the dressing room. But I hear if he's arguing with Sancho, Martial, and Varane, but like, how can they argue with him? They haven't done anything. This isn't like Chris, at least Cristiano Ronaldo can have a say because he's backed it up. Those three haven't backed anything up at Man United. They've all been poor. Martial,
right. You're right on that.
yeah, Martial, I like him. If he's fit, he's a good player, but he's not fit enough. And he doesn't score enough. He's not consistent enough. So they should work with him to turf those three out if they're causing a problem. He seems to have the support of some of the players, I would say, particularly his former Ajax buddies. I think they would support him on there. And there is signs of improvements. He won a cup. Yes, he then followed up with a 7-0 loss. But he's done something more. He's offered something more. He's offered something. I think they need to stick with him and turf those players out because the next manager is just going to have the same problems. He's not going to get enough out of Sancho. They're not going to get enough out of Martial, Varane, etc. So I think his job's safe. I just think it takes a while to click. People forget that season a couple of years back with Arteta, just how bad they performed, but they let him slowly bring his players in and it works. It starts to click. I think his job's safe. But out of the top 6, 7 at the moment, he's under the most scrutiny, isn't he?
100%. I think your point as well with Sancho, Martial, although you're valid in saying like what they've done is Ten Hag's in the right. as Jamie said, you've got their assets at the end of the day for the club. They're very expensive assets for that club, and it's probably easier and cheaper to get rid of a manager than to back him and force those players out for cut price deals.
Yeah, but this will be the problem in the long run. Is now you're in that position where the players have got too much. You just keep copy and pasting the same situation. You keep putting the plaster over the crack in the wall, or putting it over the leak.
That's what they need to, don't
You
they?
have to take time. That's it. Man United themselves are a big club, and they generate enough money where if they're going to take a 40 million loss on Sancho, they can take the 40 million loss. They need to sort themselves out and sort out the recruitment, which they can do. But there's no point keep giving that, oh, let's just sack him, and we'll move on, because it's just going to happen again and again and again. If you want the long-term success, it's got to be consistent from the top. You can't have it from the top, give it to the bottom, and then go like that. It's got to have a nice little chain. And that's the problem. He hasn't helped himself, Ten Hag. I think he has been a bit silly with the things he said, particularly about Sancho. But he also, there needs to be more support about it.
Yeah, and I think as well, just one stat to bring up, which is pretty damning for Man United as a whole. They've not won away against the top 8 sides in over 2 years. So 13 away matches against sides in the top 8. They have not won since October 2021. That is abysmal. And that's why he's under pressure.
Yeah, and definitely is. Like, it just is. That's not good enough at United. Even Ollie had a much better record than that. Ollie was doing. I think he did an actual record of not losing away from home. So it's mad how much it can swing in that way. I think just moving on to one other manager before we wrap up. Well, Chelsea, we know, just like to sack managers. It's more of Abramovich's era, but Bowley's done it. Poch, could he be gone, George, anytime this season? Just let's be honest, you are 10th.
Mm.
So it's not like you're, absolutely thriving. You're below United, and we're talking about how much he's under scrutiny.
Yeah, fair point.
Actually happen?
I don't believe it will. Obviously, I can't rule it out. It's Chelsea Football Club at the end of the day, but I will be absolutely stunned if they got rid of him. This feels like a long-term appointment. He's doing the right things, right stats, right. He's saying the right things as well. So I am pretty confident he won't be sacked. We've got to change something at some point.
It just had to be asked.
Yeah, absolutely valid. But yeah, that wraps us up for another episode. As always, please do reach out. Give us a follow on all the channels and let us know your thoughts. And also, have we missed any managers today? We covered a lot, but we didn't cover them all. But as always, like, comment, and subscribe. You know the drill.